Hey everyone, I hope you're doing well. So, this video, I decided to make it because over the past few days, I've been seeing, especially from the last video I posted about the mother daughter OnlyFans, it really led me to think about kinks themselves. And, to, like, I love all the comments and like what people have to say about it because you actually get to give your opinion and to give your insight about it, and like I can also see, okay, this is how people see it or understand it as, right? And if you want to even like ask why kinks exist or what kinds of kinks exist and everything, which is a fair question, right? The idea of kink itself is like an abomination to a lot of people, or they pretend to be. They pretend to treat it as an abomination, but they also have their own, right? They literally have their own. And is there really, is there a sanctioned or an unsanctioned kink? Are there are there kinks that are allowed or not allowed, or like invalid or valid? Like it's so you really, you actually honestly get to understand somebody's uh mindset when you ask them about topics like this, because I personally, like, somebody's kinks I don't think are necessarily a reflection on their own character, because if somebody's a piece of shit, you're not going to find that out from their kinks necessarily. You'll know that up front. And to me, like, as long as kinks or things to do with kinks involve like consenting adults, however many there are, couldn't care less. Like, literally couldn't care less. That's not really the topic I wanted to talk about though today. I wanted to bring up how, the concept of taboo itself, kinks are really a form of taboo escapism, right? They're probably the most taboo form of escapism that we as humans have. And nowadays, it's dead. It's not dying, it's dead, right? I'd say from it died in around like 2014, 2015, maybe, right? You know, I normally watch a lot of even political content, and the like I've never been to a like gay pride event anywhere, but I see that there's a discussion about like having kink displays of kink, uh how do I say it? Basically just call it kink at pride, right? Like displaying kinky objects or clothing, whatever the case, like things associated with kink and all that. It's a hefty debate, but I think it's more so having children at that event while also having kink at that event. I don't know if it makes sense to me. Like, if you have, let's say, like a pride event, if you had like a kids one and then you had like an adults one, I think that makes sense. Like, maybe it would make sense, right? I don't know. I'm really talking out of left field here, but it's kind of a tangent, because what exactly is left to be taboo? Once there's no taboos left and the whole shaming culture is dead, what's left, right? Is it not just instant gratification? Is that not what's left after all that? And I don't co-sign on shaming culture at all, right? Like, literally, shame is the root of all narcissism. It's the root of all so much, like, just hatred and misery in this reality. Shame, it's just shame, like, literally. Shame is what creates fear, right? You don't start off fearful. You have like that shame is imposed on you. Then you become fearful, and then like if you don't do anything about it, you start spreading that fear. And you know, take a look at whatever social media it is you want. Take a look at whatever viral music videos you want. And it's all just like hypersexuality all the time. All the fucking time. Freaking time. You know, maybe it's my understanding of kinks that are maybe lacking. But to be honest, what is it, what is it about, why do you have the kinks that you have? And why do you have kinks in general, right? If you're really honest with yourself, it's your form of an outlet for whatever unmet desires. Yes, I'm talking about sexual, but like it could be emotional, it could be mental, whatever unmet desires you have in your mind, right? That's what kinks are there for. And now, and I've talked about this before, like everything in this reality is being molded to your specific desires, to have you as comfortable and complacent as possible, for you to keep the algorithm consistent, essentially. That the algorithm will consistently predict what you want to watch, what you want to consume, what you want to buy, you name it. And in doing so, we've known for a long time that sex sells. And like a lot of people have been truly, truly deceived about this sexual culture that we currently live in. And I try not to say these terms. Like these are the things that have always existed. There is nothing new under the sun. Nothing.
So, with feminism, we've seen sexual freedom being promoted as girl power, and it's almost like society is trying to convince women that they should want to have casual sex, and that if they don't, that there's something wrong with them. And somehow, if you challenge hookup culture, you're anti feminist, and you should go back to the Stone Age. Yes, there shouldn't be any social stigma surrounding promiscuity, and everyone should be able to do whatever they want. But being free and being encouraged are two different things. Because the stigma around sex isn't what it used to be, men and women, especially in college, often get the idea that everyone is doing it, and that waiting until you're in a committed relationship or even until marriage is lame, because you should embrace your sexual freedom, especially for girls where that freedom has changed drastically since birth control. But sexual freedom shouldn't mean more casual encounters. It should simply mean the freedom to choose without having anyone or anything influence your choice.
But we have to understand that our current culture surrounding sex has it's really I don't it's really deteriorated quite a bit. And I can say this because, if there is one thing, if I, to all 20 of my female subscribers, I'll just tell you now, if you currently do this, please stop competing with men, especially when it comes to sex. Please stop, right? I'm not accusing you of doing it if you're not, but if you are, just stop, you know? There's so many women I would talk to, and like, they just sound like broken records. Right, the same sentiments over and over and over again. But then, like, when I talk to guys, it's like we're living in parallel realities completely. Women are trying to keep up with men sexually in a way that is completely destructive to them, incredibly destructive to them, because most men themselves can't keep up. Always think about these really indulgent uh these really indulgent concepts in our culture, even like food, drugs, alcohol, sex. These are all things the ruling class have had to their own benefit for most of human history. They still have it now, right? But the average person also has access to these things now as well. They don't have the capacity to indulge in the same way that the ruling class indulges. Because the ruling class will literally have a perennial supply of whatever it is they want. However decrepit it is they want, however degenerate it is they want, they will always have that supply. Most guys won't. You can have it out here. You can go to whatever orgies or whatever parties or whatever it is, but emotionally, mentally, you will be wrecked eventually. And I bring up how, like, even the friends that I know who go clubbing a lot and are in that lifestyle, they're tired. They literally come and tell me like they're fucking tired. They're done, right? They're done. There's guys who have literally had like sex with over 100 women from their own words, right? But seeing how they move, I can kind of believe it at the same time. And they were literally addicted. They were just addicts to sex. They were either addicts to sex or addicts to attention or admiration. And yet, you don't even have the kind of position of power that would assure you that constant flow of attention and admiration. This. I'm not even trying to be like, oh, if you're poor, you shouldn't have sex or something, right? I hope it doesn't sound like that, right? Fuck whoever you want, as long as it's consensual, right? Beat your meat as much as you want, as long as it's all consensual. However, as long as you're doing it, if you're doing it with the right intentions in mind, I don't see a problem with it. 90+% of people are not. They always have some sort of ulterior motive to doing so. And, whatever kink it is you have right now, you could probably go to YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, and find entire, huge content creators and pages about whatever kink it is you want, or even, articles on Google, you name it. And I generally think that's a good thing, right? In terms of education, in terms of informing people, right? I generally think that is actually a really good thing. However, once you factor in monetization and the algorithm and what content gets pushed to who, the good intentions fall apart very quickly. Because it's one thing to have kinks, and it's another thing to live in a natalist world where they clutch pearl about the safety of the children, and yet, so much of, natalist culture is just centered around, eroticizing children, if I'm being honest. So much of it. Oh, I just remembered. I was gonna do a video on beauty pageants, and I will do one later on. I find them incredibly sickening. Those you have a 5-year-old or a 6-year-old girl in like a princess tiara and dress and makeup and all that kind of it's weird. It's weird because it's an industry. And if it's an industry, you have people that are trying to make as much money as possible off of children's fashion pageants or shows or whatever. And even then, okay, you can see it as something cute and everything. I really don't see the cuteness, especially from some of the documentaries I've watched about it. I don't see the cuteness anymore. It's not cute. It's sort of like saying a Disney child actor is cute, right? Even though we know what happens to Disney child actors after they've grown up, past the age of, I don't know, 17 or something, right? Putting children into media industries is always a fucking terrible thing to do, essentially. But to my point, it's one thing to raise a child not to be ashamed of their own sexuality, because I think a lot of like a lot of I guess you can call them average people. A lot of average people have this very uh, puritanical understanding of their own sexuality, which is pretty sad. And if you look at uh, statistics for which countries watch the most porn, I think the first country is like South Africa. Then the second one, I can't remember. I can't remember, but I know like Pakistan and like Iraq and like a lot of Middle Eastern countries are right up there. Like there's some of the heaviest porn watchers in the world. And yet you look at the societies that they live in, and like in some places they can't even hold hands. Like a man and a woman cannot hold hands in public. They can be arrested or worse. A woman can't appear in public without a hijab or a full uh, niqab on. Or they could be like, you see what's happening in Iran right now? That is a direct example of what a culture of sexual repression leads to. A 21-year-old woman is just brutalized, killed, because she had strands of hair showing out of her hijab, right? This is why I'm not I will never be a fan of like sexual repression, or like there's these are things. If you see, if we actually lived in a decent culture, they would teach kids about their bodies very early on, and what rights they have to their own bodies, right? What they can do with their own bodies, what or if what to do if somebody else they don't want around them, and things that they shouldn't even entertain at all, right? Teaching them bodily autonomy early on. But again, that goes far in contrast to the natalist narrative. Okay, we know this. We know this. We understand. That's not something that they have anticipated. And now it's led to this culture where I didn't realize that teachers talking about their sexuality is such a topic of contention now, because like I didn't know the sexuality of any of my teachers at all. Didn't fucking matter to me at all. I personally wouldn't have changed anything about whether I learned from that class or not. I understand, like, what it's exhausting to think about this shit, man. It's so exhausting because why is the classroom is now like a stage for political theater, more so than before, right? And this happening in Western countries, right? In the 1900s, you'd have like, I don't know, the Bible is true and blah, blah, blah. And then they started accepting science. Then it's come all the way here to like uh, Mr. Allen's preferred pronouns are they, them, and they're like a demi-queer pansexual, blah, blah, blah. Like, okay, fine, that's not really the problem I have. The problem now that it's so evident to me that, if this is what is being championed by the left wing, they don't see children as anything more than blank slates, as the right wing Bible thumpers do. It's all about your philosophy, your personal philosophy, and how you can transmit that through these children. No matter how uh, thoughtful and conscientious you think it is, right? It's your personal ideological philosophy, I should say. To me, that's where Taboo itself is dying. And maybe taboo shouldn't exist at all, right? Maybe they shouldn't. I'm not trying, like, the thing is, I don't know about what alternatives there are, right? It's something I haven't really thought about or looked into. These are things that I see something just doesn't add up, and it doesn't add up. I'm not trying to say, like, I have a better solution, but at the same time, what we're doing, if it's not helping us any better, I don't know why we should need to continue doing it. And it's this ancient tradition of treating sex like a commodity, sex and children themselves as commodities. That that's where I think um, the the idea of sexual repression comes in very easily, because if everybody was allowed to indulge in their taboos, everybody was allowed to understand that they're individuals, and everyone was allowed to understand that they have autonomy over their bodies, and they can interact with other people and share that autonomy amongst one another to their greatest benefit, the ruling class wouldn't even exist. you know this is just a hypothetical, I guess, but the ruling class literally wouldn't even exist if that were the case. So, you know, if you have any sort of taboos, why do you call them taboos, and why do they feed your kinks, or why do they, what gives you your kinks? Because I personally enjoy mine. Sometimes I'll even just say them straight out. I personally am, and to find other people who also enjoy them is a really good thing. And you know, I'll never compromise. If it doesn't involve consenting adults, that's not a kink. That's a fucking crime. That's a fucking crime, right? That's not, yeah, that's to me is like the ground floor of it. But I really don't see a future for kink anymore. To be honest, I really don't see a future. Not with the reality that we're living in right now. Not with the current cultural trends that we have right now. I see a lot of people who are broken in general and are going to be even more broken in future because they've convinced themselves of a sudden ideal of what liberation is. Notice I didn't just say women, like people, right? Liberation and empowerment. And the sad thing is, trying to push back on it will simply just get you canceled and deplatformed, and you know, um, mob outrage. People just do whatever it is to continue their. I don't want to call them vices. Just if it's self-destructive, in particular, it is a vice. If it's exploitative, it's a vice to me. So yeah, I guess I'll just call them vices if I've described them like that. Yeah. So I hope I've made sense. Once again, certain topics like this make me think too much, so I can't really articulate myself the way I wanted to. But again, I can always revisit some of these videos. I can always revisit and do better versions of them.